Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 175. 175. Whenever you hit one of these kind of round numbers or these what do you say, fifth numbers, I guess? Anything in a 5, it feels like a big milestone. I kind of stopped doing milestones a while ago because I don't know. They add up and they feel less special. Maybe when we hit 200. When we hit 200, that'll be a special occasion. There were no comments. Sorry. Well, there were no comments and no questions last week. Although, I guess to preface this, the Oscars just happened, and one of the movies that we talked about did win. It was a big winner, that being Anora, the titular film of the last podcast. Anora Day, Anora Dala. One category, that's what they're called, one category that I want to give it a special mention to is the editing category. Now, I haven't seen most of the films in the other, any of the other films, I don't think, in the best editing category. But I can make an argument for Anora, because I was thinking about it after I saw the nominations, and I thought, yeah, actually, I can totally see why. One of the most important characters in the movie, Igor, gets almost his entire characterization based off of cuts to him silently reacting to stuff. This is kind of like it's one of those instances where people don't really, if you aren't thinking about it, you might not even realize that that's an editing decision. That's a very conscious decision that an editor is making, probably, usually in tandem with the director. But the decision of when to cut to that reaction and for how long, and what footage to play that over, just this silent reaction. And that's he is such an interesting character, probably the next best character in the movie behind the lead, behind Anora herself. And so much of who he is and how he fits into the whole situation is told entirely visually through the specific decision to make those cuts. And I thought that was really cool. I think that's cool that something that is so subtle that most people wouldn't even realize was actually recognized. I don't know if that's why it was recognized, because a lot of the Academy Award voters, I don't know if they're really cognizant of those decisions or if they just voted on it because it had a lot of editing in it, but that is editing. That's why one of the reasons editing is so cool. You can completely change the meaning of something, from film to final assembly. It is such a cool art form. Anyway, remember a while ago when I was talking about how it's fun to go to locals and all that? Well, I have been to some fighting game locals as well, in addition to my regular Flesh and Blood ones. I've been going to Caliburst, which is a tournament that is hosted once a month, or it's like an event, a meetup. Specifically focused, it's a fighting game meetup. Specifically, it is run by a FGC community member. That's a little redundant to say, FGC community. An FGC member named Pat the Flip, who has been playing Guilty Gear Xrd for probably 10 billion years. And he hosts Caliburst, in addition to the online tournament series Rev Tuesdays, as a way to keep the game alive and keep interest in it, because he just loves it so much. He's a freak for Xrd. I lean a little more towards plus R, but I'm never upset. I'm always happy to play some Xrd. So the last time I went, the first game that I played, the very first game I played when I entered the open bracket that they were holding, and the first game I played was on stream. I think that I am specially equipped for that, because I have played fighting games on camera, on stream, on my own personal stream on my channel. So talking and commentating over my own gameplay. So I had kind of that probably freaks a lot of people out, but I actually felt okay with it, and I won that match. I felt really good about it. It's a really fun time. Again, I would recommend This might seem really obvious if you are somebody who goes out and searches for social events. But I'm telling you guys, this is the most like homebody nerd male thing ever. I'm telling you guys, it's really cool to go out and find people who do the same hobbies that you do and hang out with them for a couple hours every once in a while. It's a really good time. I go there with a friend of mine who I met playing Flesh and Blood, and funny enough, I kind of want to use this to segue into just talking more about Fab. Are you guys sick of that yet? Are you guys sick of it? I'm sorry. I'm saying it's a fucking really good game, and I play it every week. But I want to talk about something that I find really interesting that I think I neglected to mention every other time that I've actually talked about the game, and that is its very unique rotation system. So in most card games, as a little refresher, in many card games, there is a need to switch up the card pool a little bit. For multiple reasons. Number one is you want to shake the meta up. It takes some pressure off of new cards from the designers feeling like they have to power creep the game to justify releasing new cards. And it also just straight up like helps sell product for the company, right? That is the business model. At some point, you need to take something out of the card pool so that you can introduce new stuff into it. It's generally more healthy. Even Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is infamous for being an eternal format, so to speak, it's what it's called, where they don't rotate things, does have banning. It puts things on the forbidden and the limited list. It does take stuff out of the game. That is essentially a form of rotation. I guess I didn't even explain rotation. Rotation is, I believe, probably definitely first done with Magic the Gathering, like the original trading card game, where it's essentially just in their standard format. The way that standard works is that you are allowed to pick from any cards from the last 3 years, I think. I think they just recently kind of changed the rules. So there's like one specific set called Foundations that's going to be legal for 5 years or something. And then the other additional sets are going to be three in the game for 3, something like that. Essentially, at a certain scheduled date, cards rotate out of the format. You are not allowed to play them in standard. This, of course, leads to people, coming up with their own formats that include cards from wider spans of time. Some of them rotate, some of them don't. Some of them are locked to specific eras. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has this as well with certain fan formats like Edison and GOAT, where the people take like the card pool and the ban list from one specific point in time, and that's what they play with. They play through that meta, and they develop that out. Sometimes it can look wildly different from what it did at the time that it originally existed. Anyway, that's kind of how rotation works. Flesh and Blood handles card rotations in a very interesting way. So they release sets 3 to 4 per year. That's kind of their hard limit. They've said they're never gonna do more than 4 sets a year. Magic. And sets themselves do not rotate. They do not rotate out of the game. There is no date where things from the first set of the game, Welcome to Wraith, are gonna suddenly be illegal anymore. They do occasionally target ban specific cards, but that's kind of its own thing. And there isn't an especially large ban list. Every now and again, they'll feel like a card needs to be banned. Instead, what happens is that heroes rotate out. The centerpieces of your deck is your hero card. But they don't rotate out on a schedule. They rotate out based off of a leaderboard of what are called living legend points. Essentially, every time a hero places in the top 8 of a tournament, or even more so if they win a tournament, they gain a certain amount of living legend points. The bigger the tournament, the more points that they earn. And these are all like these are all of the officially sanctioned, like, partnered or LSS original run tournaments. LSS, the producer of the game. So once you accrue, the leaderboard updates every Monday, and once you accrue 1,000 living legend points, a hero is, they don't say rotated, I think they say retired. They're essentially retired out of the classic constructed format, the main format of the game, the game mode, let's say. So basically, if a hero is really strong and they win a lot, they have a ticking clock. You can be so strong that you essentially you burn bright and you burn out, and they're in the format for, say, the way the math usually works, a very strong hero will be maybe 2 years, which is honestly still quite a while. I don't believe there's ever been a target ban of a hero before. They just don't do that. I don't know if they have a specific rule that they won't do that, but they've never done it. So this leads to kind of interesting scenarios where, for instance, there was a bit of a hubbub because one of the original 8 heroes actually retired to Living Legend status. And by the way, there is a Living Legend format where you do get to play with, heroes who have gone to LL. So it's not like they're just gone, burned the card forever, But Viserai, the first Runeblade hero, finally went to Living Legend. He was in the game almost from the start, I believe in the second set ever released. And he was considered okay. He was considered like a mid-ish tier hero until Rosetta, a set called Rosetta, came out, which had a bunch of Runeblade support that he benefited greatly from. And just over time, he just shot up a lot in power in the meta. And finally, after like 4 or 5 years, he hit 1,000 points very recently and rotated out of the format. It's a very interesting system. I've talked to people about it, and generally people seem to like it. They seem to like it, and I think that there are real strengths to it. One of them being that if a character isn't particularly strong, you have a lot of time to play with them and develop them out and maybe find new strategies. If they're okay, a decent hero, like a decently strong hero, will probably be in the game for like 3 to 4 years, maybe, that's a very long time for something to be around and legally playable. And you get a lot of time to actually, you don't get these situations where a hero comes out, they're not very good, and then, 2 years, 3 years went by and gone. They're gone forever. They don't get another chance. They actually do get to stick around for the most part. And this leads to very funny instances where, for example, if you look at the Living Legend leaderboard, I believe at number 2 or 3 is a hero named Dash Intrepid Explorer. Dash has been sitting at around 940 points, just under literally like one or two tops away from getting retired. She's been there for 2 years and has not budged. She has gotten no points in 2 years. She was really strong for a while and then kind of got like power crept / stuff got introduced that was good at countering her and just like did not perform well in the meta. It just changed up on her. She's been there for like forever. There's actually a different version of Dash IO, like input output. She's a mechanologist. It's like a technology thing. And she is, as I understand, like fairly like mid high tier. So you get like funny instances like that, and then you also get the very opposite end of the spectrum, which is there are 2 heroes who have never gotten any LL points since release, those being Teklevossen and Betsy. Teklevossen I feel kind of bad for because he has a great concept. He's a mechanologist, and his whole deal is that he's basically, so the game plan is he is Tony Stark, and you have to build an Iron Man suit that he uses the equipment slots. You play like new equipment over your existing. You start with like these prototype pieces, and then you play new pieces over them that have different abilities and stuff. There's like literally different armor sets. It's very cool. He is unfortunately not very good and has 0 LL points. The other one is Betsy, who is a Guardian. Guardians being the big, slow, heavy, kind of like very defensive characters who stall out and defend a lot and then swing at you for like 13 damage in one turn. Betsy has had the unfortunate title of being maybe one of the worst heroes in the game. She just doesn't do very much. I don't go like too much into specifics. She just is not very strong at all. She kind of relies on the system of this mechanic of like wagering, where you like compare attacks against each other, and then the winner like gets a reward of like a gold piece and stuff. It's just, she isn't very strong. So on Saturday at Caliburst, I was talking with my fab friend, and I said, hey, do you think, because they're releasing a so-called Guardian Mastery set, which is a set focused, it's like a smaller size set that is focused entirely or almost entirely on basically giving support to Guardians, because a lot of their matchups are very polarizing. So they're trying to make them a little more balanced in terms of, they're not so feast or famine. And I said, hey, what's the over-under? What do you think? How much do you want to bet that, I'll be generous, I'll say by this time next year that Betsy will have any living legend points? And we genuinely like had to talk about it, and like, I don't know, they gave her they gave her a really good card, a specialization, which a spec is a card that only a certain hero can use. So it's like a Betsy specialization. Only she can run it, no one else. It's like if it was on any other Guardian, it would be broken. It's called, I think, Drink 'em Under the Table. If it was on anyone else, it would be busted. But because it's on her, she did not shift at all. She didn't budge at all. And we were talking about, we're like, I don't know. It would be really funny, though. It would be crazy. The very next day, he sends me a local Road to Nationals. Well, not local to us. But a Road to Nationals event, which is an officially licensed event that contributes living legend points, had a Betsy in top 4. The brave player Table and Legs piloted Betsy into a top 4 position. Apparently the whole store, quote, erupted into shouts and cheers when he made it, because it was the first points that she had accrued ever. Let me actually check the leaderboard now. Let me see if it should have been updated. Living Legend leaderboard. It should be updated now with her points. Okay, scroll all the way down. Betsy at an astounding 4 points. She's on the board. Let's go. That stuff, like, even there could be problems with the system, right? Like, maybe you just really like a hero and I don't know, maybe they LL really fast. It does rely on player performance. It's obviously like interesting, right? But I think one of the best parts about it is that it does create these really interesting, funny moments. Every time there's a big tournament going on and someone hits Living Legend, it's like a big event. It's like, holy shit. And people talk about, oh, they're close. It's like this kind of race. People are watching the leaderboard to see who's on top and who's coming up, how the points are going to get affected, who's a fast climber, right? So I've been playing Azalea for a couple months now. I really like her, but she is fairly strong. And where is she at on the leaderboard right now? She's number 3. Yikes. She's number 3, sitting at 842, which actually, based on how many points you accrue per event per place, probably means she'll be in the game until at least around the end of the year, which is why I'm building a different deck for a hero named Florian. He's like an emo Earth Runeblade guy with like a cloak of autumn leaves. And he's really fun. I played him on Simulator. So I'm building a Florian deck to replace, eventually, start working into that when Azalea fully LLs. Also, I'm very excited for whatever comes out of that pirate set in a couple months. High Seas. Yeah. So if anyone is like, I don't know, it's a really interesting system. I'd be curious just to like toss it into the comments as to what kind of impression that gives anybody else. It was very surprising to learn about. But I haven't heard any particular rumblings about if people, I've never heard that much like dislike for it, which I think is kind of interesting. As far as I know, I've never heard of a different game that employs anything like it. So yeah, Fab is cool. Weekly Fab shill. All right, and now I want to go on to Steam Next Fest. So in previous Steam Next Fests, I have kind of made a point to download a couple, like 6 to 8 demos for games, little indie games. If you don't know, Next Fest is an event that Steam holds once or twice a year, just about, where various indie developers put up demos for their games. And you can just go click around and find something interesting. I believe Ruffy and the Riverside was... Actually, I think the demo came out a little before Next Fest. But yeah, that would be kind of an example of the type of game. You can find lots of cool stuff. And I've talked about it many times before because I love finding indie stuff. There's tons of cool little gems and games to keep your eye out on. Even ones that I have gone on to download, purchase. I bought Indica. Remember Indica, that weird game about the nun? I bought it. I haven't played it yet. I keep forgetting I own it, but I'll get around to it at some point. Anyway, I decided that instead of playing it on my own time, it would be kind of fun to turn it into a stream idea and just knock out a couple of them and see what I think. So, as is very often, I am not particularly picky with what I choose to download from Next Fest. I kind of just find something that looks kind of interesting, and then I just click add to library. I put them all in a category on Steam. I install them, and then we take a whirl. So I did a very fun stream the other day in which I had a little wheel. I put all the games I downloaded on a wheel and spun it, and then we went about 30 minutes. I kept forgetting to set a timer, but went about 30 minutes. And then at the end of the 30 minutes, decided whether or not we should continue. Some of the games we finished before the 30 minutes were up, or the demos, I should say. We finished before the 30 minutes were up. And then I would do a poll. I did a poll as to figure it out. Fun stream. I was happy with how many people showed up for a stream at like noon on a Thursday. Unemployed hours. Anyway, I want to talk about the biggest winners and losers, or just kind of like the spectrum of games. I guess I'll go from the top down and in terms of categories. So let's say the biggest winner of the stream. 6 games. We played 6 games across, and the biggest winner was a game called Am I Nima? So Am I Nima is a game from a United Arab Emirates developer called Ho Games. They have nothing else on their Steam history. No. So they're not UAE. Sorry, I'm confusing it with something else. I believe, I don't know where exactly they're from. I am pretty sure that is there any info on there? Yeah, there's no real info on their developer page. But I'm pretty sure that they're Southeast Asian of some sort. They reference Kongi, which a lot of the whiteys in my chat did not know, but I knew because I have a Filipino girlfriend who has made me kongi. It's like rice porridge. It's kind of soupy, like a soupy rice dish that you could just add a bunch of stuff in. Wasn't super big on like the consistency or the wateriness, but I think flavor-wise I actually quite enjoyed it. Anyway, Am I Nima? I downloaded this I read the first line of the little blurb on the store page and I said, yep, downloading that one. It is something it goes something like, you play as a little girl who has to convince her mother that she is in fact her daughter. And I said, that sounds too interesting not to check out. So this was probably the most interesting game that I played. Essentially, here's how it starts. You are in a first-person perspective, like POV the whole time. You wake up in a basement, tied to a chair with like a bungee cord holding your head up. Someone comes in who you kind of recognize as your mother. You're this like little girl who is maybe Nima? You think you are? You could be, maybe you're not. You're not quite sure. You don't have a lot of memories that you can tell. But it feels like it's in your best interest to convince your mother that you are in fact her daughter Nima. So here, your mom starts asking you questions about stuff, and here is how what the actual gameplay is. So on the right side of the screen, you have a brain, and in the brain will little thoughts will appear, words like terminologies, nouns, people, places, emotions, concepts, things like that. You can click and drag them over these words and concepts over each other to combine them into new things that are essentially like the branches of thought. So you will think of, I don't know, let's just say Nima plus mom plus dad equals family, right? If you've ever played like what are they called? Like alchemy type games? Games about just you'll combine fire and water and you'll get steam out of it. And then you combine steam with something else to get something new. It's that kind of gameplay. Someone in the chat likened it to a word cloud, like a video game version of a word cloud. And that's fairly apt. Essentially, you are combining ideas. You are starting from simple things that get given to you, and you are combining those thoughts to explore your own memories and your emotions about things. And it's hard to describe like the overall gameplay or the overall like what happens, because so much of it is like entirely, it's not really directed. I spent a lot of time, if you go back and watch the stream, I spent a lot of time just combining things, like in the free space between like during the conversation that you're having. You can just go and just combine words and see what comes out. And I spent a lot of time just, what does this make? What is this and this? What does that mean? On the left side, you have a complete dictionary or glossary of all of the terms that you have discovered so far, and you can click on them to make them appear in the brain just in case you need them or you lose them. You can like do a quick clear to clean up the workspace. And then occasionally your mom will ask you a question, and you can drag certain terms and things down into like a speech bubble and choose that as a dialogue option. Like you'll say something based on that term. It's hard to describe it because it's so micro. It's lots of these completely like player directed. I'd almost describe it as like a stream of consciousness game. It's like the closest thing, like fuck the like the what is it, the open road, the long road, what is it? Is it just the road? I don't remember. Why can't I remember that? Like, my dad would always reference that. Hang on. What is that book? Stream of Consciousness Writing. Book? What is that book? I'm not going to be able to let this go until I found it. Not the Waves by Virginia Woolf. It's like The Road. On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Yeah, my dad would always reference that. It's like the closest I could describe to a stream of consciousness game, because it sort of literally is. There is this sense that as you are exploring Nima's thoughts, you are naturally branching out from one idea to the next, and you are frantic. I wouldn't say there isn't like a time pressure, but there is a very free association way of going from one concept to the other, and you learn things. Like, a lot of the game is mental. A lot of the game happens mentally. Like, you'd almost want to take notes on it. Like, you'll combine mom and work, and you'll get scientist. You're like, oh, she is scientist? You'll combine like scientist with blood or pain, I think, and you'll get experiment. And you'll combine like, then, okay, scientist, experiment, and it's like monster or something. And you're like, whoa, what is going on here? Is that there's an unreliable narrator aspect to it almost, where you're like, okay, the fact that you get monster, does that mean that you literally, does that mean that says something about your mom, the mom character, that you can't quite like pull the exact details out of? Or is it like, I don't know, she's thinking of Frankenstein, scientist, experiment, monster, something like that. You get these, these hints of Nima and family, and you'll get like trapped or something like that. And you're like, oh, and she has this connection of like her relating to a fish in a fishbowl or something like that. You go to her room, and the room is, I'm not sure if the room scene is supposed to be like you're actually in the room, or you're just kind of hallucinating / dreaming it. And you'll click around, and you'll find that you'll click around and get new words to combine and all that, new little clues about history and what's going on. And I think like the window is boarded up. The window is like barred up. It's like a garden window. And the door has like multiple locks on it and all that. And you're just trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And it was completely engrossing. We got really into it on stream. Like, I put up a vote, and I was like, yeah, this is gonna get a yes. We're gonna keep playing this. The demo ends after I want to say maybe 20-30 minutes. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe actually probably closer to, I think it took maybe 25. So let's say 40 minutes. 40 minutes total, like when I was really taking my time trying to explore everything, combine as many words as I could and all that. It took me about 40 minutes, let's say. And then I went back and I replayed it to see if I could get different outcomes for the conversation. There seems to be, at least in the demo, a hard point where the game kind of forces the conversation to go a certain way that leads into sort of a cliffhanger, I guess. So I'm not sure if that will be represented in the final game, or if that was just how they decided to do it for the demo. It seems like there is some kind of recursive element where you might be playing through the same scenario multiple times. I'm not sure. But things kind of loop around a little bit. There's a psychological horror aspect to it. I'm not sure if it's like a game over, or I think it's implied that there is an in-universe like cycle of some sort going on. Although I very mysterious. Lots of hidden cards to be played, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you are interested in just interesting, neat psychological horror experiences, Am I Nima? Really cool. Totally go and wishlist that. I have it wishlisted because it seems like it has a ton of potential. Probably have the most to say about that one. The other, I would say, other big winner, complete 180, Is This Seat Taken? Is This Seat Taken is a very cute, pleasant puzzle game. It is about sorting people into seats. It's in this very pleasing art style, like lots of big, like thick outline shapes and colors that are easy on the eyes, not super saturated, not super high contrast. The world, it's this kind of world of shapes. They're like shape people of circles and squares and triangles and all that. And they need to sit down, and it's your job to sort them in a bus or a concert hall or a wedding with all the seating. Each of the people has different requirements and wants for them to be happy. Essentially, you place everyone so that they're happy, and then click complete. Everybody has different wants. So, for instance, one of the first little twists that you're given is it'll be like, okay, so it starts out with this: you're on a bus. You're sorting people on a bus, and this person wants a window seat. Okay, so you put them by the window seat. This person wants to sit next to their friend, who is like marked, and you'll hover over them, and there'll be an arrow pointing to their friend. So you know. So you put them together, and one of them wants the window seat. Okay, so you satisfy all the conditions. Then some real stinkers show up. There's some people with just literal stink clouds around them because they forgot to shower. And like you drag and put them onto the seat, and they'll have an actual danger zone indicator around them showing how far their stank spreads, how many tiles it goes. Some people have sensitive noses, and they do not want to sit next to stinky people. So you got to place them outside of that range. Some people want to talk to someone besides them, so you need two people who want to have a conversation. Some people are tired and they want to nap while they're there. Other people are listening to music that's kind of loud, and they can't be put next to the people who are napping because they're going to wake them up. Some of them are, there's kids and adults. Some of the kids want to sit next to other kids. Some of the adults do not want to sit next to children. You're at like a wedding party, and some people have preferences for certain foods that they want to sit at a table with. And you're just going through and kind of working through the process of sorting everybody out so that they're happy. Pretty short demo, but very enjoyable. And I just kind of wanted to play more. Like I was done with it, and it was just a really fun puzzle game. Is This Seat Taken? So go check that one out. That is another very cute little demo. Now we get into like the good, maybe not entirely my thing, but pretty fun category. Promising category that I would still give a recommendation. Maybe not super for me, but yeah, we're in the middle tier. I would say maybe that I'm not going to really bother organizing these actually. Maintenance Required, the first game that I believe I played. Maintenance Required is another one of these sorts of horror games that take place on a desktop interface. The idea, but it's got a little twist. I've played one or two of these before, as some of them as part of Next Fest. And this one has a bit of it's got a neat twist. So a lot of times these games it's like, okay, well, you click on the files, go through the folders and all that, and find a video, and then maybe open up a web browser. Maintenance Required takes place, I want to say in 1988, maybe earlier, I don't know. You're on like an Apple II. So you're on a by our standards, much more primitive desktop. The main purpose is actually to play test a video game that is on the machine. So you have like the build of the game, and you can look through the folders on the desktop. And while you're looking through the folders, you can't access all the different files, but you can at least see them. And you click to the game, and you might have to go back and forth. Sometimes files get corrupted and all that. You're doing playtesting stuff. The twist is there's a spooky thing in the game. There's a spooky dog. There's a it feels okay. It feels a lot. I want to say it's either Brazilian or Portuguese, just because there is a Portuguese language option besides English. The game feels like it was made by someone who was very influenced by like late 2000s, early 2010s creepypastas, which I, as a kid, was also into. I don't want to say I was a creepypasta kid, but I was into them, if that makes sense. I don't know. I wasn't into like the creepypasta fandom, but I definitely did. I did get spooked out by Lavender Town and, Slender Man and stuff like that. And speaking of Lavender Town, this is just it is like someone in chat said, oh yeah, this is totally based off of someone who played Pokemon Fire Red scary spooky ROM hacks as a kid. You were essentially playing a kind of Pokemon. The art style is very Pokemon based, like the old original Game Boy ones. It's in like 4-bit colors. It's all monochrome. You walk around on this RPG map, and you get into, it's supposed to be an educational game, and you get into fights with like homework that you have to study, and then you can learn it to like absorb its abilities. It's a simple, obviously the focus isn't on being a super deep RPG experience. The RPG stuff is there to just kind of be, I don't know, like the ground floor of the game, if that makes sense. The concrete basement of the game. So it has like a first person perspective in battle, and then you have different attacks that you can unleash on the homework. Once you get its health down a certain amount, instead of like capturing it via Pokeball, you learn it, and then if you successfully learn it, then you'll take its ability for however many uses it has. There's items and all that, and it's a little RPG. It's a little bite-sized RPG experience. But then things get spooky, because there's some kind of weird, as they call it in the game, a weird mod. There's a weird mod, and there's this fucking dog faced with like a smile and sunken eyes. It's Smile Dog. Smile Dog is in the game. And I won't lie, maybe I'm a bit of a baby, but I did get jump scared. I did get jump scared on camera. I thought for my money that the game had and again, it could just be me that I get very easily sucked into stuff. A fairly engrossing atmosphere. That's what I'll say. I thought that it did its job, and when it wanted to kind of punch me with a jump scare, it did work. It did work because I was invested in it. It's not a terribly long demo, but it is cool. There is an integration of the whole desktop thing. There is kind of something where you can press a button. You can press the Q key and turn off the system to like reboot it and hopefully like fix certain bugs. I wasn't sure. I couldn't figure out exactly like if that removed the dog or something like that. Occasionally you would find an item, and the item would be corrupted, and I think it would make the dog thing more aggressive. You do game over if you touch it, like the machine crashes, the program crashes. So you have to go into the files and like delete them. There was a moment where you have to click. There's like you're at a playground, and there's buttons by the 5 different little pieces of playground equipment, and the idea is you're supposed to press them in a certain order. So you go into a little gallery that has the order that you're supposed to. It has like, here's the number that you press them in. But it doesn't, like, all the images are missing. So you have to like go into the game's files and then see which what they're labeled number wise, like playground 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. And then when you open up the image, it's like this spooky, like thresholded or like posterized black and white image photograph of a piece of playground equipment, and it has a mood to it. And then you click on one and the dog is fucking in the image and it like vanishes and you're like, what the fuck? Yeah, it was a pretty, I would say it was pretty cool. It was a cool experience, and I enjoyed it. Maintenance Required is the name. Next is Breath Edge 2. So Breath Edge 2, I was like, why not? It's like a survival game or something. So I booted it up, and I was very unprepared for what it actually was. It is a survival game, but it's a lot more than I was expecting. This is the game that was from the UAE developer. So I didn't know there was a Breath Edge 1. Whenever I see a survival game and it's a sequel to something, I kind of assume in my mind that the first game was some sort of smaller scale, like beta kind of for whatever the sequel is. That tends to be, it's like, okay, well, we made the first game and did a certain amount of, with the budget that we had. We did a certain amount with the budget that we had. And then now we have some money, so we're basically just going to do the game again, but with more budget, a new engine, something. We're going to make it 3D or something like that. That's what I kind of assumed. No. Well, maybe. I don't know how that much about the first game. But Breath Edge 2 is a survival game with a plot that is a sequel to the first game that I had never heard of. So yes, it is a survival game. It's got bars, They gotta have bars. It's a survival game. You got hunger, I think thirst, and oxygen level because it's a sci-fi game, and stamina and health and something like that. You got your survival bars. The premise is that you are like you play as the main character of this, who's kind of the leader. I'm not sure, of some kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy style misfit group. There's like the main character is just a guy. I don't think he has any dialogue. He just grunts. Not even like effort grunts. He just goes, like he has no actual spoken. He has like sub-verbal dialogue. Some lady named Babe, who's like sassy or something. And there's a robot, and there's like another robot or something. I couldn't really tell exactly what was going on, but they're on a train. They're on a space train, and the space train makes an emergency stop because the space train station that it's supposed to stop at has had some sort of big calamity. And you get out and you got to survival your way through the gate to open up the gate that is inaccessible via train and go through yourself. And it's a survival game. It has an inventory and equipment, and it has crafting, and it has different tools that you can craft out of things that you get from the environment. You can explore that. You can explore a lot more of the environment than I expected. There is a lot of zero gravity. There's like simulated gravity, and then you kind of walk out to a certain part of the environment, and then you can just kind of free float in space and move around. This comes at the limitation of an oxygen meter that depletes as, the longer that you are out of either the train, which is sort of like a home base, or these little oxygen stations that will like instantly refill you as soon as you get close. So I didn't get particularly far in it because as a survival game, we only played for like 30 minutes. As a survival game, you gotta like, it gives you like a checklist of things that you need to make, and then you're gonna spend some time getting all that stuff together. With the time that I played, it was kind of neat. It was a lot more than I was expecting. I have to admit, I have played a couple survival games. I'm no stranger to the genre, but I can't really confidently say I have much like taste in it. Where I feel, oh, I like games like this, or I don't like games like this. You know, I've put a decent amount of hours into Minecraft for someone who doesn't really like Minecraft that much. What other survival games have I played? I guess I played, now Satisfactory that's not a survival game. You don't have bars. But I've played a couple, you know, in this genre. I guess Terraria. Pal World, kinda? Yeah, I guess. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of it, so I can't say, oh, this is a really good, this does what I wish every survival game did. I don't have any feedback like that. But I can say that from what I played, it was, if like maybe mildly stiff feeling and a little like, that's kind of, you know, I would say an impressive amount of polish and budget feels like it was put into it. Definitely from a smaller studio, but they have done a lot with what they have, is what it feels like from the opening 30 minutes of the game. I guess I should mention the art style is it has a nice art style. It's kind of a parody of like Soviet, it has some kind of like Soviet Russia parody setting or something like that. I don't know. It's like space Russia. I don't know. There was a disclaimer at the start about how like it's all political satire or something, and like don't take it that seriously. And I was like, okay, all right. The characters themselves have kind of slightly almost caricature-esque exaggerated proportions and facial features and stuff like that. The texture work kind of reminds me a little bit of Team Fortress 2 in that way that it's almost painterly. You can feel kind of like a bit of a like brush strokes in the textures. Almost like a super flat style of design, but not quite, right? Dishonored, weirdly enough, like a much more colorful Dishonored. I'm grasping a little bit to accurately describe it, but that's kind of what I would call it. Yeah, it was, if you were interested in survival games, it might be worth checking out. As far as I'm aware, most survival games don't tend to have much of a branching narrative. It was, or not branching, but involved narrative like this does. There are they tend to skew a lot more sandbox. But this has a lot of, like, you are using survival systems and survival mechanics to work towards a plot-driven goal. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It's definitely a silly game. It is a very comedic game. The comedy didn't land for me too much. I didn't personally find it that funny. I was a little bit taken aback by the voice acting. It was, at first I kind of thought it was maybe Eastern European or Russian. But a lot of that's what I thought. I have no idea. Just based off the accents, because there are some very strong accents. A couple of the characters, especially ones who come in for like one or two lines, clearly have voice actors who do not speak English as their first language. I don't want to say this to be mean. It's just like you can pretty obviously tell they have varying accents of varying thickness, which leads to some sort of odd delivery. It's clearly not like the most optimal way to deliver some of these comedy lines. But it also had a weird kind of charm to it. I'm not gonna lie. I was a little bit like smiling at it and just like trying to figure out what was going on. Breath Edge 2. If it sounds interesting, give it a whirl. Cool to see something from a more international developer. Let me actually click. Developed by Red Ruins Softworks. They have a couple games to their name, namely something called. Actually, no, they have one game, Breath Edge, and also something called Canyons, which they have announced but not released. Oh, Breath Edge 1, it's $6 right now on Steam. Jesus. Okay. Mostly positive reviews. Very, very positive for all reviews. Okay. You can get this and what is something else in a bundle? Bearded Survivors. I don't know what this is. Okay. Oh, it's the same publisher. That is a really similar looking main character. Hype Train Digital. Oh, they published Pathologic as well. Interesting. Anyway, yeah. Breath Edge 2. Next is Pachinko TD. Pachinko Tower Defense. So I am no stranger to the tower defense genre. I've played Bloons. I've played Plants vs. Zombies. I've played probably a bunch of just random tower defense games on, Flash websites when I was a kid. And it's always a genre that I don't think I'm ever... I think I'm always down for a good tower defense game. It's something that it strikes a very comfy niche of your brain of like strategy. It's a nice balance between an idle game and a more strategic game where, okay, there's strategy in laying out all of your buildings and calculating, like figuring out Kunitsugami, another tower defense game, figuring out where to place your towers and what buildings to put down and unlocking stuff. And that's like a fun progression and all that. And then there's kind of a satisfying element to getting a really good setup and clicking go and then seeing all the enemies get torn down by your defenses. It's this nice sweet spot between a strategy game and an idle game where you get to kind of sit back and a lot of the effort is before the action, and the actual action is like seeing the fruits of your labor pay off. That's a lot of fun. Pachinko TD puts a really fun little spin on it by combining it with essentially, what if you were playing a tower defense game in a pachinko board? So kind of like a pinball board, if you aren't familiar with what a pachinko machine looks like. You launch a ball up a chute, and then it drops down, and there's a bunch of little pegs and stuff. And then you, I guess, try to hit. I think in a pachinko game, it's like you try to land the ball on a certain like hole at the bottom or something to get more points, to get more of a payout. Pachinko TD essentially takes the board, and the idea is you've got a little castle at the bottom of this pachinko board, which is that's your life. If the castle dies, you lose. And you start with a certain amount of gold, and you can spend the gold to place buildings at certain points around the pachinko board. They are essentially making up the little pegs, right? So you place them around the pachinko board. You can put down fortresses that are just like defensive things that deal damage. Once the wave starts, little goblins shoot up and and start falling down. Whenever they make contact with a fortress, they building, they'll deal damage to each other. The buildings respawn once they've been placed down. They can be destroyed and they'll respawn at the end of once you're finished with the wave. And then there's all these you got the fortresses, you've got houses that will generate you bonus coins at the end of a round if they survive that long. You can get upgrades for your buildings. So you can upgrade the fortress to have more hit points or deal more damage or be like a mage tower that shoots a projectile. There's these different upgrade paths for them that you have to commit to for each one. You can make the houses more sturdy. You can make it so that they produce extra gold. You can upgrade your castle itself, which gives you more spaces to put down buildings. And then you just tower defense, baby. And it was just very simple and very cute. It has a very doodly, someone said that reminded them of, what is it, Fancy Pants? Yeah, Fancy Pants Adventure. That sort of doodly. This would totally be a Flash game, right? In days past. This would be totally be a cool, fun Flash game that you get sucked into for an afternoon. And it was just really fun. It was fun and charming. The goblins are these cute little sketchy designs. You get different enemies that come up. There's an orc who deals more damage and has more health. There's a barrel that comes up that, once the barrel gets destroyed, a bunch of little goblins pop out that you have to kill. There's archers who drop arrows, then they deal a bunch of damage because they basically multiply how many hits they do from the arrow and the contact damage. I don't know. It was just really fun. I think people in chat really enjoyed it. It's one of the, I was like, oh, is this going to be really simple and maybe not too engaging? But it was a very fun time. It was a very fun time. Pachinko TD, another game that I would recommend. And a game from, I believe, another, do they have anything else? Developer is known as Hog, and this is the only game that they have on their dev page. So, yeah. By the way, all the links to these are going to be in the description, so you can go check them out. I would totally, it's a cute little game if that sounds fun to you. At least download the demo. The demo comes with, I don't know how many levels are actually accessible, but it said 7 levels. Maybe all of them you can get to. We didn't quite get to all of them because I kept dying on level 4 is when it kind of started to get a little more intense before we decided to move on. I moved on just because, it is a very simple game. And we kind of got the gist. It was fun. I think if it was on my own time, I probably would have kept playing it. But just for the sake of the stream, we moved on. And I will now be moving on to the one game I really was not feeling. It was called Songs of Rats. I downloaded this kind of just based off of the art style. It is, you know me. I love my games with minimal colors and extreme, I don't know if there's a term for it, but monochrome, really intense, really thresholded feeling monochrome color palettes and stuff like that. Bleak art style games that's really my jam. So I said, oh, Songs of Rats, it's some kind of dungeon crawler thing? Cool. Sure, and it looks like that. Let's check it out. Songs of Rats is, I wasn't really feeling it. I didn't enjoy it. The art kind of put me off because I very quickly realized that most, if not all, of the assets are AI generated images that are then heavily color filtered, which I found to be a little lame. It's okay, look, I mean, I get it if you want to use AI stuff for, and I've said this in the past, if you're a student or something and you really feel like you need to use it and you don't have any kind of substitute or anything like that, fine, whatever, if it's a personal project. I just find it a little bit lame. I find it a little lame if you're dropping it on Steam as part of an indie game thing and you're eventually going to be asking for money for it. It's okay. That was a little bit lame, a little bit deflating. On top of the fact that it is, it's a very classic style dungeon crawler, which is to say that you fucking die a lot. Some people would say it's a hardcore classic experience. Other people would say it is very boring because it kind of feels like you can't do anything because you die in 3 or 4 turns maximum. It has a sci-fi premise. There's some kind of big complex that you exist in. I guess it kind of reminds me of Blam. How do you pronounce Blam? I don't know. Where it's this big structure in space that you exist. It's this mega structure that you explore, and you get a certain, every day you get a certain selection of places that you can go, and you can find scrap that you can trade. You can find supplies like med kits and food. You can find weapons, and you can find enemy encounters. And the combat is extremely simple: attack or don't attack. Yeah, it in a lot of cases you will just get your ass completely beaten. I don't know if it's intentional, but there isn't like a scaling up. There isn't like a scaling up, nor is there really a like leveling zone. You just kind of maybe pick the fight you can sort of kind of win. You'll lose a lot of your health. You only regain like 1 health point per food, and you start with like 5 food. And you use up 1 food every day. So just passing the day, it's just like it was like a significantly less fun Darkest Dungeon. Like, you know, Darkest Dungeon has that very tense push and pull of resource and risk management. This kind of felt like that, but where it was just like, then I died, and then I died, and then I died. And as far as I could tell, there wasn't like a trick that I was missing. It was just, well, you get a random selection of events that you can go to per day. You get like, maybe you can go to maybe 4 or 5 of them each day, and then you have like stat checks. You have 3 stats: body, mind, and spirit. And it felt like the game would give you events that specifically were stat checks for your worst stats, because you only start with like 5 points to invest, and it'll be like, oh, you know, so I was like, okay, so I'll put 3 into body, and then 1 into mind, and 1 into spirit, and then I do like and then all I'm getting are mind and spirit checks, and I just cannot do anything. And then I fucking die at like every enemy encounter, and it's like, it just wasn't very fun. It wasn't very fun. It didn't have, I would just die over and over again. I don't know how what other feedback, like when I died, I was like, okay, was there anything I could have done differently? Was there any tactical decision I could have made to help? It just felt so up to the roll of the dice as to what events you could get the selection to, how the, you know, combat would go down. It's just attack or don't attack, and sometimes you miss and sometimes they miss. And it just, you felt like, you know, part of RPGs, right, is that you making something an RPG mechanic implies that the player, you kind of do it because you're giving the player a level of agency over that thing. This is a stat that you can modify, that you can do something about. And when you give the player that, but also make it feel like they don't actually have any agency over what happens because of how randomly it's distributed, it's just kind of a sort of unfun experience. And it also like totally killed the momentum of the stream. So I did not enjoy Songs of Rats. I wouldn't really recommend it. I wasn't a big fan of the gameplay loop nor the AI artwork. Sorry. That was probably the bottom. The developer has, whoa, okay. They have a couple demos, a couple other games, something called Project Aurora with a demo from 2023, only released 2025. Some kind of, this is like completely this is like a base building game. Okay. And then something called Queen of Moths, which is now 55 cents. It is a visual novel from 2023. Okay. All right. A weird fiction game. Art style wise, I mean, it looks kind of cool. It's 2023. I don't think it's using AI. Oh, no, wait, reading the reviews. Whoops. The review is suggesting the review is there's a review going, like an analysis of the artwork and what they probably did to get the images. Wow. That is funny. Interesting. All right. Anyway, Yeah, that is the Steam Next Fest wrap up. So I guess the biggest winners were Am I Nima and Is This Seat Taken? I also I got a little bit of enjoyment out of Maintenance Required and Breath Edge 2 and Pachinko TD. So those are going to be my recommendations. All right, we're about at the hour mark. So now that we've chunked through that, I want to talk a little bit about, what do I want to talk about? I didn't structure this the way that I usually do. I never talked about Nosferatu. We never got the chance. Kat and I watched Nosferatu the day after we recorded our podcast. I want to talk about Nosferatu because it came out on streaming and we watched it. And you might have heard about it. It got nominated for a couple awards. Didn't win any, which I thought was a bit of a shame. Because we finished the movie and I thought to myself, you know, it's funny, but this might be the best Dracula adaptation in a wonderful ironic twist in history. A Nosferatu remake, sort of, is one of the best adaptations of the Dracula novel, Bram Stoker's original Dracula novel. I'm assuming most people are familiar with the history of Nosferatu. It was a silent film from the 20s? 10s or the 10s or the 20s, which the 1910s, not the 2010s. Nosferatu, if he was a swag Asian. It was from the early 20th century. Silent film. Which was basically, it came from, they wanted to do, the filmmakers wanted to do an adaptation of Dracula, but did not have the rights, so they made a ripoff of Dracula and just changed most of the names and a couple of the plot beats. And it was so blatant that it actually backfired on them, and they were forced to include adapted or based on Bram Stoker's Dracula in the credits of the film, because it was so blatant. But Nosferatu is a classic, very influential. It's the first vampire movie. It's very early in film, very early horror film, one of the first, basically. And for that reason, it has a lot of historical significance. I actually remember back when I was a kid, there was a stint where my mom went back to college because she was really resolved to go get her degree, because she never finished college originally. And she took like a film class or something as part of her something or other. She took like a film class because she needed credits. And I remember walking in on her at the family computer watching Nosferatu for a class and like taking notes on it. And she was telling me about it and how, oh yeah, all the acting is really silly because, you know, it's silent, so they need to really exaggerate things. And but there's like for that reason, like she was like, yeah, but it's also like really, it's also like the acting's also very strong for that same reason, because it's so exaggerated and it's really going for it, you know? So it's kind of funny to get a Nosferatu remake in this day and age. And you know what? I thought this movie was great. I thought it was a great horror movie. It is not very deep. It is not, it's not trying to say, I feel like there is this, it's funny. I feel like horror movies, maybe in the modern day, I'm not going out watching every modern horror release, but I feel like a lot of horror movies are either, it's almost like a very polarized, where it's either like a total like nonsense, nothing to say kind of slasher type movie that's just about kills or jump scares or something. And the other half is like, it's actually a metaphor. It's like an artsy metaphor for the cycle of abuse or something like that. Or it's some like very, it's got something to say, and it's like a more, you know, stylistically, it's a little more subdued or something like that. Nosferatu is almost like a halfway point. I would not say Nosferatu has it doesn't have a big message. It doesn't have a big grand moral theme. It is a fucking vampire movie about a scary ass vampire. And the filmmaking is impeccable. It is an incredible visual work, fantastic performances. incredibly engaging story as well. It's a period piece. It doesn't feel, it feels very highbrow, but also isn't really interested in like getting across anything particularly deep. And I kind of liked that. I thought it was cool to take such a simple concept of, no, a vampire can be really fucking scary. It doesn't have to just be, I'm Dracula. Oh, it doesn't have to be Hotel Transylvania. Vampires they have been so normalized in pop culture. It's kind of cool to see a take on one that is legitimately terrifying. I should mention, we watched this movie in the morning, in broad daylight. We could draw the curtains, but like light was still streaming in. Very bright room on like a somewhat tiny monitor, with like the sounds of the street just all the time, just, with cars in the background. And it was the worst possible condition to watch the movie in. And let me tell you, I was still totally drawn in. I was in the film's clutches. I was under its teeth. The basic plot of Nosferatu is pretty much an adaptation of Dracula. I have read Dracula. I've read the book Dracula, and I read it in high school for fun on my own time. And I mean, I like it a lot. It's obvious why it's so influential. I'm a big fan of Dracula. Frankenstein's probably one of my favorite books. I'm going to be honest. Those are the classic horror books, horror monster books of modern literature. What was I talking about? Right. It follows the same thing. There's a real estate agent who is working in. He works at a real estate firm. This time in Germany. I think in the Dracula, they always change where it takes place. If it's England or America. This time it's in Germany. And he is sent by his boss to visit Transylvania because there is a mysterious count who has he's interested in signing the contract for an estate in Germany, this old mansion that he wants to move into for his quote-unquote retirement. And the main character goes there, and it turns out spooky vampire stuff. That's usually the first half, or at least first third of the story. You get the whole thing with Nosferatu, the main vampire, traveling overseas on the boat, killing everyone on the boat. There's a very cool thing of like unleashing a plague, like literally a vampire plague, like death blood plague, via all these rats that he takes with him in his coffin. And then there's also, I would say, in this movie, in Nosferatu, a very strong sexual element. The other main character is the agent's fiance. Yeah, I don't think they're married. They're fiance, who has this kind of psychic spiritual connection to Count Orlok, the vampire Nosferatu, and he basically like wants to take her as his bride for whatever reason. You don't really need like a super strong in-universe reason. He's a Nosferatu. That's what they do. They eat and suck out women. And there's a very there's always been a sexual connotation to a vampire, right? There's thematic, symbolic relationships between a vampire feeding on people and these sorts of carnal desires. In the original Dracula, he was fixated on Mina is her name, and wants to take her. He takes women as his sort of ghostly bound brides. And here they really lean into that, the idea of almost sexual conquest or predation, and the link that he has, he's either appearing like it's sort of unclear, which is neat, in her dreams, or maybe like to her literally. It's kept a little bit vague. You can read into it. That he's going to take her within, X number, like 3 days. He gives her a deadline of 3 days once he gets to Germany. And I don't know, it's just a vampire movie. They're trying to stop him from taking her. The cinematography in this movie and the shot composition and colors are absolutely amazing. Obviously, Nosferatu, the original, is a black and white film. And I would say that out of almost any movie I've seen, this film is not in black and white, but it evokes the same power and visual mood as a black and white film. I really have to commend the color grading in this movie. The shadows, the parts where the lighting, the shadows, how deep and how bright different parts of the image are, the way that these shots are composed with these very, very strong blocking, visual blocking. Just like gorgeous, beautiful, haunting cinematography. The look of the film is incredibly strong. It leaves a really, when I say I was pulled in, I was like, oh my God, like I laugh at this scene. It's a little funny to me, like in my mind, but it's the classic scene where he's going to the Count's castle, and on the first night that he's there, they're doing something, whatever, at a table, and he pricks his finger. He cuts his finger on something. Sometimes it's like a letter opener. This time he's cutting bread, and he accidentally slices his finger open a little bit. And like in the Bela Lugosi Dracula, there's a hilarious shot where you get a reaction shot of Dracula looking at him and like looking at his finger and the little drop of blood that starts slowly just leaking out, and you get to Bela Lugosi's face and he looks so horny. He looks like he is fucking salivating. I saw that in a theater and people were laughing because it's like, oh, I want to suck. I must suck. That scene in this movie is fucking terrifying. It is like, I have to give it up to the actor for, what's his name? Turner? Nosferatu cast. What's his name? Nicholas Hoult as Thomas Hutter. Incredible visual facial acting. The dude looks scared out of his fucking mind. The actor for Orlok himself, Bill Skarsgård, it just has this amazing presence on screen. His face is obscured by shadow for almost the entire film. You never get a real good look at him, but just the way that he stands, the costuming is great. His voice, the way that he speaks, the way that he's lit, just he completely, every time he's there, he just saturates the room, with his presence. There's this idea of vampires being especially persuasive, having these hypnotic eyes. And then sometimes, like in JoJo, for instance, that's like, oh, Dio has this magnetic, supernatural charisma to him. this magnetic force that just draws all your attention to him. And that kind of aspect of a vampire, that it's not just like the things they do, but they're when they're around, you just feel it. They have a heavy weight to their presence. It is so apparent in this movie. Like every time he's there, it's so strong. I'm pretty sure there's some audio stuff going on as well. I'd have to rewatch it. I was just so, and pay closer attention. I was just so enraptured by what was happening on screen, and just fucking Nicholas Holt's face. He is just covered in sweat. He is caked in sweat, and just there's these almost, Orlok gets up and he stands by the fireplace. He's cast almost entirely in silhouette. And he's like, come over here and I will attend to you. And there's this shot where it almost, like, I couldn't quite tell what was happening, but it's almost like there's a second Orlok standing behind, what is this? Fuck, what's the character's name again? Hutter, behind Thomas Hutter. And it's surreal. It feels like the whole castle just feels unreal. It just should not exist. Things are just, it's so wrong. And it's fucking horrifying. It is so tense. It's not a movie that has much in the way of jump scares. I wouldn't say, I might have jumped once or twice, but it's not the main appeal of the film. It's really just about the atmosphere. If you just like an incredibly thick, dense atmosphere, fuck, Nosferatu is good for that. It makes me, I wish we'd seen it in theaters. We just totally missed it. If it gets screened again, I would love to go see it. If you can get a screening nearby you, this would be awesome to see on a big screen in a dark theater. You could reasonably, I guess, substitute it for like a decently sized TV in a dark room with no distractions, but like, yeah, I would love to go see this with, like, maybe rewatch it with some friends or something in a setting like that, because man, it was a great horror movie. Just on a technical aspect, like, I don't find the thematics particularly deep, but on a purely technical aspect of just form. Awesome horror movie. Can't recommend it enough. If any of that kind of a horror movie appeals to you, it's nice because you don't have, there's almost like, oh, it's a horror movie with like it's about like a big, it's like a big intellectual thing. There is, like, the filmmaking is highbrow, but the story isn't. You know. So yeah, Nosferatu is great. Also great performances all around. Willem Dafoe is in it as, I forget what his character. It's like whatever. He's Van Helsing. He is Van Helsing, but it's, you know, the original, whatever fake name they came up for him in the original Nosferatu. So yeah, that movie is awesome. I would totally recommend it. It's on streaming now, so go catch it. Okay. I got two more things. Number one, there was a news story, and then, damn, I'm hungry. Speaking of Nosferatu, I'm a hungry guy. I should have looked this up beforehand, but there was a news story that was kind of tragic. This was a couple weeks ago. I did not talk about it because it happened like after I filmed the previous podcast, like the podcast before that, but then we did the one with Kat, and that was not very news focused. But I want to talk about it because I have some stuff to say. This is from gamedeveloper.com. Sorry. Hi-Rez has announced that they are laying off developers and ending development on 3 different games. So Hi-Rez, creators of Smite, creators of Paladins, creators of Tribes, recently just launched Smite 2, and also announced that they are laying off some people and kind of shuttering active development of a couple games. Hi-Rez is unfortunately a little bit infamous for this, for dropping support for games, good games that they could probably keep, supporting. It's just, people have a love-hate relationship between the games that they make and the way that they treat them. So, 3 games are getting shut down. Smite 1. The first one is Smite, the original. That's pretty self-explanatory. You could assume that they were probably going to transition off of Smite 1 and into Smite 2. As for how they're handling it and how much content is actually in Smite 2 compared to the first game, I can't tell you. I don't know what the general consensus is on there, but ending development at least makes sense to me. A game called Rogue Company, which I had never heard of. I am pretty sure, is this an Epic Game Store exclusive? This might be an Epic exclusive. No, it's on PlayStation. Was it not on, it says Windows. I don't see Steam. No, it is on Steam. Okay. Yeah, no one's heard of this. I'm sorry. I am sorry. But soundtrack composed by Run the Jewels? I don't know what this is. Apparently it is a tactical, free-to-play, multiplayer, tactical, third-person shooter, hero shooter video game. I had never heard of it. I'm not entirely surprised then that it is getting shut down. I did not hear much discussion about it or much lamenting. As unfortunate that is as it is, just not a lot of people cared too much about it. And finally, Paladins. And I will weep a little bit for Paladins. I don't know if I've ever talked about Paladins. I have a surprising number of hours on that game. Let's see. What am I sitting at? 135. That's a lot for me. That is a lot for me. I have quite a few hours on Paladins. I have invested a good amount of time into it. And it's a shame because I feel like there's kind of a curse. There's a curse where I have been pretty vocal in the past about my dislike for the MOBA genre. And I have very specific things about like kind of genre conventions that I don't like. Paladins was one of those games. Like Smite, eventually I dropped because the usual things came up and just frustrated the fuck out of me, and I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Paladins was like a MOBA that I really felt got it right. I really felt it was like a MOBA, but with enough of the MOBA stuff taken out to make me really enjoy it. And not to say that it's a lesser game, because there was, I thought, quite a bit to make up for it. It had a lot of really cool ideas. So Paladins is, a lot of people actually wrote it off as a like an Overwatch ripoff, and I don't think that that's like entirely fair. It's definitely, there were definitely characters that were Overwatch-like, but it brought in a lot of, I would say it's closer to a MOBA. It's like something somewhere between a hero shooter and a MOBA. And to be honest, the hero shooter kind of is just a MOBA with a lot of the MOBA stuff taken out. Like an item shop in a lot of games, for instance. So essentially, Smite was a first-person team-based shooter that had kind of very classic style of game modes. There was, actually, no. Okay, so first of all, the main game mode was really cool. It was a cross between King of the Hill and, what would you call it? Payload? Push the cart style. Essentially, the game started out as a King of the Hill where both teams would compete for the center of the map to control that by just standing on it and accruing points. And then it would then turn into, once a team captured the center of the map, it turned into a payload game. And that you would have to push the payload to the end. And it kind of took place in like 2 or 3 rounds. It was really fun. There was like an individual King of the Hill mode. I'm pretty sure there was a deathmatch mode, like team deathmatch. It had like a really nice back and forth that benefited different teams. You were locked into your hero. There was no mid-match hero switching, but it did because of the fact that the game style changed between those two phases. Different heroes would be benefited at different points in the game, which was kind of a neat twist and a cool dynamic to have. Characters had very, again, Overwatch-like. You'd have a primary, secondary fire, a couple abilities, maybe a passive and an ultimate. But where the most interesting part of the game, my favorite part of the game, was the cards system. So every hero in the game had so-called cards. These were essentially you could customize your different abilities with modifiers. So let me look up some examples, because it's been a while. It's been a while since I actually played. But so for instance, they come with a couple different like preset ones. If you've ever played League of Legends, it's a little bit similar. Imagine character-specific runes from League of Legends. Like, you can invest points. Okay, so here's an example. There's like a Soldier 76 type guy with gun and grenades. So he has 4 different categories for his that you can modify. His frag grenade move, his iron sights, which is like his alternate fire type. That's like his alt fires. He just is aim down sights. And his dash, it's called hustle. And then armor / weapon. So more like innate passive stuff typically. So you start out with like the basic kit, and then you look at frag grenade, and you're like, okay, frag grenade, what options do I have in these cards? So you can invest points. You have, I think, like 15 points, and you have to invest all 15 into your total like card setup. So there's 4 different cards for frag grenade. Each one has 4 different cards. You have the option to generate. What is that? This image is a little low res. Generate 6 ammo for each enemy hit with a frag grenade. Another one, reduce the cooldown of frag grenade by 1 second for each enemy hit by it. Reduce the cook time of frag grenade by 10%. Or gain 8% movement speed for 2 seconds after using it. So basically like little modifiers of extra mechanics that you could add on to an ability. You might not want to go with any of them. Maybe you want to go with your dash. So you want to invest into the run and gun card. Regenerate 2 ammo every second while using hustle. Or reduce damage taken by 3% when using hustle. And some of these, so I believe each card had 5 levels, like 5 potential points that you could put into it. So you could have like a very even build where you take a little bit from a lot of different cards. You could focus like a fifth of them and just max out one card. Or you could go anywhere in between, right? So I remember, let's see, yeah, some of them were really cool. So there was a character called Sky, and Sky's whole deal was that she was like a stealth poison DPS character, like squishy, very squishy. She would pop out of stealth and then just rapid fire you down, deal poison, and then kill you, and then go back into stealth. So one of her abilities, she wasn't considered very good. She had like a stealth move that would just turn her invisible for a bit. But then she also had a smoke screen, which was like an AoE thing she could drop down. And I believe the smoke screen could affect allies as well. So a lot of her, it's like, okay, so for her hidden, her invisibility, you have a card that like increases the duration of it, increases your movement speed, reduces cooldown. It lets you heal while you're while you're hidden. She has like a poison dart, and you can reduce the cooldown, reduce your reload speed after you hit someone with the poison dart. You don't consume ammo after hitting an enemy with a poison dart, stuff like that. Well, she had one for her smoke screen. Heal for X amount of health over 2 seconds after entering smoke screen. And mind you, this applied to both her and her allies. So there was like a build where you could play her as like a hybrid assassin DPS character and support, like a healing support, where you could like stealth around, deal some damage, and then drop a smoke screen on another one of your like DPS teammates and like stealth them and heal them. And that was like a genuinely kind of viable build for her. A completely different style of playing the character that was only possible using the card system, and that you didn't technically have to do. You could go with a much more... I usually didn't play that. I usually just went for like really high damage assassinating combos because that was what I found the most fun about the character. And I'm sure some of them... I'm not an expert on every single character and like what their cards were. You know, I played the game pretty casually, even though I did put a lot of hours into it. But there's a lot of characters who have these game-changing, identity-changing cards that you could choose to take and invest a lot of points into. And that was one of the most interesting... Like, it really kept the game from feeling stale. Like, okay, I've invested a lot of time into, like, one hero, but I could play them in, like, a couple different ways. And they would give you 3 different presets of different ways to play the character. And that was really cool, and I appreciated that a lot. It did also have an item shop. And I think the item shop was actually, personally, I'm sure that there were balance issues or whatever. But the item shop was very simple. It was not like what you'd probably expect if you've played a lot of other MOBAs. Essentially, it gave you a lot of... I believe there was like 4 different categories of... I'll like look it up again. There was 4 different categories of upgrades that you could get. These were basically upgrades. They called them items. So there was offensive, defensive, healing, and utility. And you could, I think, buy like 3 different tiers in each of them. And they would be things like attack speed, you know, reduced damage taken, stuff like that. One of the most popular ones that a lot of people would typically rush, and I have genuinely seen... I haven't played Overwatch. I have never played Overwatch, actually. Something I've seen Overwatch players who went to Paladins praise is that there is, like, anti-healing. There is an anti-healing item. It's called Cauterize. Basically, when you hit a character with just... Basically, it gives you an on-hit effect to reduce the healing of an enemy by up to 80% for like a second and a half. So if you are continuously hitting them, they're getting their healing just cut to almost nothing. You do earn what am I saying? What am I trying to... You do earn points as you play. There's no minions or anything. It's just like objectives, getting objectives and like assisting your team and getting kills and stuff like that. So just like a actual counter to healing that you still have to build up to. I think it only starts at like 30% at rank 1, but it's like, oh, okay, cool. There's another, like, you know, stacking damage after you get a kill. What were the utility ones again? Oh yeah. Oh, it had horses. The game had horses. When you leave the base, you're on a horse, which speeds... Basically, it's... I don't know. Like, I liked so many things about it. Like, it would speed up. They were like, oh, well, how do we speed up the process of getting from the base to the action? Just give people a mount when they leave base. And you're just faster on your mount. And then you dismount it as soon as you, like, attack or are attacked. You can buy an upgrade to increase your mount speed. Gain more money when you get kills and stuff like that. It's a very simple shop, but it gives you enough freedom and flexibility to adapt your strategy to what's going on in the game. I think the most common one is a lot of people would just take Cauterize because of how strong healing could be. And that kind of like aided that. So healers could still do stuff, but there were counters to them that were conditional based on you actually hitting them. Was Cauterize removed from the game? Huh? It says it's under removed items in the wiki right now. Was it removed? Oh no. Interesting. Okay. Well, anyway, maybe it was just because everyone took it. It was too strong. Yeah, no, what was else about? I don't know. There were some really fun characters in there. Yeah, removed 2022. Huh. Okay. I'd played the character. I'd played the game well before then, but yeah. Who do I remember being fun? There was like this big like Diablo guy named Rom. Who else did I like? Oh, there was like an archer character who was like a sniper. His name was Strix. He was like an owl guy. Oh, Bomb King. Bomb King was silly. You roll bombs around. There was a Reaper, like Reaper from Overwatch, but he was more like fantasy skull man named Androxus. I think was Lex like was he the tracer of the game? What was his I think he was. He would, yeah, oh no, he had like a fun slide. He was like he was Lucian, that's who he was. Yeah, from League of Legends. That's funny. So Paladins is unfortunately that game that, with the audience it had, there were a number of people who really did click with it. Because I will go to bat for Paladins, because it got written off as like, oh, it's like an Overwatch ripoff or whatever. But it really did have something kind of interesting. It had a lot of interesting ideas that were really... that really set it apart from its competition. And I think that those are ideas that are worth returning to, that I think made a lot of improvements as to how, like, this felt like a MOBA game for me, you know? It felt like a MOBA that I could play consistently. I only really stopped playing just because I moved on to other stuff, not because I got frustrated and quit the game and all that. I only ever played it casually, mind you. So I can't, you know, maybe it was just totally fucked from a balance perspective, but I never really felt it. I just kind of had fun with the game because it's fun. It's just for a lot of people, it was like a more fun Overwatch. So the fact that they haven't announced that they are like closing the servers. I imagine that the servers will still stay up for the time being, but it is going to be in a maintenance mode. You know, they're just keeping the servers up. They're keeping the servers online. Maybe I'll pop in and play a couple games because I really did like it, and I will swing. I'll swing for Paladins. Yeah, Paladins. I will weep for Paladins. And finally, want to talk about some impressions I have, just some early impressions of a game called Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. You may have heard of it. So Vampire is a game that I have heard a lot about. Interestingly enough, it's a Source Engine game. It's like a full RPG in the Source Engine. It is based off of Vampire the Masquerade, a tabletop RPG, I believe by White Wolf. I think that's their name. Who... I don't know when it launched, maybe in the 90s or something. And it is a video game adaptation of the tabletop game with its own story and game versions, you know, digital video game versions of its systems and all that. This game has had like a cult classic following for a very long time. And I don't know, I finally got around to it. It was on sale and I got it, and I'm like maybe maybe like 10 hours in, and man, it's really good. It's really fun. I don't exactly know what to focus on, but I guess the premise is it takes place, it's a contemporary setting with vampires. Contemporary is in like the 90s, early 2000s, that around the time it was published in, you know. So it's a contemporary vampire story about your character, your own created character, who is bitten by a vampire and now has to it was in what is it? It was against the rules vampire turning. Essentially, vampires they exist in like a secret echelon of society where they keep their identities and the nature of their vampireness a mystery hidden to the mortal world. And this cover is called the Masquerade. So all these various different vampire clans exist under the Masquerade, where there are certain rules for interacting in human society, where you don't do this, you don't do that, you keep your cover. Don't blow your cover or we fucking execute you because you're a liability now. That doesn't mean that certain humans don't know that vampires exist. They just, like, obviously they can't prove it, and it's just kind of like, oh, well, every now and again they've had an interaction because of one reason or another with a vampire. You know, it's a dirty little secret of the world. I believe the game takes place in Santa Monica. Like, it takes place in California, around LA, like on the coast. You literally go to the beach boardwalk, which is pretty funny. It's always at night, of course. And your goal is just to kind of, I'd say the overarching goal, I'm imagining it's going to turn into something else. But at the moment, you are just sort of like, what is the initial... It's kind of just like, you know how you start an RPG and you're like, well, what adventure will this take me on? Well, like a tabletop RPG. Like, what adventure will this take me on? That's kind of how Vampire feels. It's kind of like, well, you're here, time to do stuff. And that stuff happens to be pretty interesting. At the moment, I can't recall any particularly strong character motivation. It's kind of just like, go do this thing, and it turns into a whole plot line that leads you into these interesting characters and quests and stuff. The environments are really cool. They do a lot. They do quite a bit with the source engine of making these big interconnected areas in this, I'll call it a free roam, you know, not quite, if I say open world, that's a little misleading, but it's a free roam around these city environments, that you can fast travel between, or I guess teleport between via taxi. Buildings to go in, NPCs to talk to, you can buy things, you have an inventory, you have all these different abilities that you can use. You have a blood meter that lets you use these abilities, and then to refill it, you got to go like draw someone to an alleyway and then suck their blood. Not enough to kill them, or you might lose points with the Masquerade, and that's not good. But just enough to replenish you, so that you're, you can actually do stuff. There is, like, you do have to abide by the rules of the Masquerade. There are 3 different types of locations that there's an indicator in the corner of the screen that tells you what the rules are for your current location. Either you're a free open combat area where do whatever, or it's the kind of like normal human society, I forget what they call it, but it's like you're expected to keep up the Masquerade, you know, don't just use your vampire powers in public. And then there is like the house of a vampire, where it is strictly forbidden to do anything, like don't use any powers at all, because I guess like it's not polite, it's a little threatening. And you have literally like stocks. You have a number of strikes that you can make with the Masquerade before. I'm not sure exactly what happens, but I'm sure there's some consequences. And you can do certain side quests to regain the trust of the Masquerade and all that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just like a cool game where I'm interested in what's going on. The conversations, the dialogue is very well written. The voice acting is really stellar, especially for the time. I wouldn't say that it's like a 2004 game. I want to say, I would say that around like the 2010s is when good voice acting became the standard, right? So this was still around the time where you might get some bad performances, but not in Vampire. I would say it's actually exceptionally good, even by today's standards. Very good performances all around so far. So I don't even want to like spoil like the characters. Like there's if you've seen the game, you've probably seen Jeanette. She's like the Harley Quinn looking vampire with like the twin tails and the like sexy schoolgirl outfit. And you know, at first you're like, oh, is this just like the very hyper appealing hot lady character that's in the marketing and all that? And she's like a really interesting character, and there are some compelling things implied about like why she is like that. Why does she dress like that? It's actually, she's like a sexy, slutty looking character, and there's like in-universe reasons. Isn't that crazy? There's like character-driven reasons for why she dresses like that. That's really interesting. Isn't that crazy? Wow. What? It is just genuinely feel very rare to see something like that. But in any event, yeah, the RPG elements so far have been pretty satisfactory to good. I kind of wish I made like the wild, whatever my character was like I forget what their name is. There's a bunch of different clans you can pick from that kind of determine the specific vampire powers that you get access to. I went with like the wild, what are they? It's like animal form, not like animal form, but you get like animal power-ups like claws and animal powers. And you can like summon ravens to attack your foes and stuff like that. It's pretty neat. I thought it looked the coolest to me. And unfortunately, I realized that the way that I like to play these games is sneaking and stealthing and lockpicking and stuff like that. That's always my favorite way to go about stuff. So I've had to like dump a couple extra points into those types of skills. But now that I have, the game is very fun. It is very fun. It has like a bit of a goofy aggro system. Characters will just spot you from miles away, and they will not hesitate to run up to you. Yeah, so it's you have to play it a little differently. That probably has something to do with my stealth level at this point, but yeah. I don't know. It's a really interesting game. The writing is good. The performances are good. The RPG mechanics and actual role-playing elements are pretty fun. I've gotten to make some interesting decisions in terms of dialogue, of like really changing the way that certain conversations go. Oh, there's some great, the source engine was made for these elaborate set piece sequences. I don't want to spoil too much, but there is a point where you go into a haunted hotel. That part fucking rules. It's like vampires. The second vampire thing after Nosferatu on this podcast. Weird. It's like, okay, vampires. It's like, yeah, it's like a horror flavored, right? But it's not necessarily scary. That is a legitimately good horror sequence. That's a legitimately scary, tense horror sequence. Wow, what a good section. Totally makes use of the strengths of the source engine. Really memorable. Like, man, like if there's just like a couple more things like that in this game, like one for each main plot line, I'll be happy. Like something of that level of quality. Really fun. Really good. Fun in a spooky way, just really surprised me. But yeah, great stuff. I'm quite enjoying it so far. I'm only, let's see. How many hours do I actually have in it at this point? 6.2? They felt like more. I felt like so much stuff happened in like 6 hours. What the fuck? I've only had like 1 or 2 sessions. And I've been meaning to play more of it, and I just haven't. Anyway, I am liking vampires so far, and I will check in when I am like near the end, or I'll probably check in when I'm done with the game. Because I do want to progress more in it. It has been very cool so far, and I at this point I'm starting to get what is so makes it has earned its cult status, right? Haha, cult, vampires, the occult, whatever. It's a cult classic. Haha, yeah. Anyway, with that, I think I'm going to draw this podcast to a close. If you've been listening this far, thank you for listening to me ramble. If you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below, but please phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. I will be back next week with something else. I'm also steady at work on the next video. I was kind of trying to figure out. It took me a bit to kind of break through how I wanted to structure the script, but yeah, I think it's gonna be really cool. It's again sort of a not quite unique video compared to anything else that I've done. There is one other video on my channel that it is similar to, that I would say. And yeah, I think hopefully it's gonna be fun. I'm gonna have fun making it. I hope everyone's having a good time. Let's see. Go play Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Go watch Nosferatu. Go to locals. Go play some of those indie games that I recommended, and go play Flesh and Blood. It's nice to be positive on a podcast. It really is. Anyway, bye.